All right, so welcome to the June 12th Burlington Advisory Committee on Accessibility meeting. This is Nate Pizzaio, the meeting chair. I am just going to go around the room and let people introduce themselves, and I'll just call up people on my screen, and they're on my screen. Karen.
Hi, everyone. Karen Downey. I'm a Burlington resident and an occupational therapist.
Scott.
Hi, everybody. Scott Barker, CIO with the City of Burlington.
Laura.
Laura Wheelock, Senior Public Works Engineer with DPW.
Ethan.
Ethan Fellows, Community Outreach Coordinator at CEDO for the City of Burlington.
And Allie.
Allie Fuddy. I'm a Burlington resident with a disability. I also work at the Vermont Association for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
Okay, great. We have this open to a public forum. I thought maybe some members of the public relating to, and we'll discuss this more in news and updates. We're going to come, and they might come later because we did have a pretty productive meeting with members of the blind and visually impaired community last Wednesday. But I do know that John said he can't be here, but they might come trickling in. So news and updates. I guess the big update to provide is that and Allie, I'm going to talk a little bit, but please feel free, Allie and Scott, feel free to share your thoughts. So on last Wednesday, a good large group of us met down by the waterfront in front of the Echo Center where the bus stop area was to figure out a good place to put the tactile sign. So it was good. There were members of the VABVI there to provide feedback, and Parks and a lot of people from Parks and Rec as well. And Scott was there to discuss the items. The discussion was just to ultimately put the sign right next to the bus stop, the bus shelter right down there, to put it in so people could to get to it, and it's right there. And then a larger discussion was about how to make sure people are aware the sign is there, because if somebody who is blind, gets off the bus, how are they going to know about the tactile sign? And that was what the larger discussion was. We talked about, adding it onto information onto the Burlington website and other places, so we more people could do research into the area, would be able to look and say, hey, I'm looking to go to the waterfront, what's available there. So the meeting kind of ended with that. And then I just figured that we could talk about, I don't know, it's like something would look like, I don't know how we do that, but Allie, I would love your feedback on thoughts about how the meeting went and what some ideas you may have gotten about providing more information to people who may want to know where the sign is.
Yeah, I thought it was a good meeting. It was nice. There was, city people there and bad people there, but we were also able to get a couple of just local Burlington folks with visual impairments as well, which I think is important. And, I think placing it right next to the bus shelter is a good spot, because it's going to give the greatest amount of ability for somebody just to incidentally encounter it, right? Like they might just be swinging their cane, run into something and be like, oh, I wonder what that is, and find a tactile sign. Much more likely that's going to happen right by the bus shelter than like if it's placed in some sort of like random place by a bathroom or like in a green space or something. So that was good. But I do think that one of the community members, Hannah, who was there, did point out, which I think is a really important thing to point out, is that, and I can attest to this as well, as a person with a visual impairment, if you're going to visit somewhere new that you're not very familiar with, then you're going to be doing a bunch of research beforehand about like what accessible features might be available in the place that you're visiting, and just, right now there isn't really a place where that all lands. So again, I think we've talked about that a bunch of times, but just I think that would be a website that would be used. But and then I think also, for people who live in the community, VABI, of course, will be publicizing this. It would be nice to, maybe if we get the Free Press, a Vermont Digger, or something interested in doing a little story, VABI will be working on that, I'm sure, because it would behoove them to do that. Just so that, because if as a Burlington resident, I'm not necessarily going to be doing research on this community and like what accessible features might exist, because I've already lived here for a number of years. And so I think that the website piece is more for people who might be coming from out of town. And then just like within our community, making sure that those things are publicized when they go into place, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And I think we talked about adding information onto the website for a while now. It's just what does that look like? How would it be organized? And how do we want to go about it? And I think that's the big thing. And I don't really, or even how big of an undertaking it is to do that. And I guess is the point where I'm just wondering if we should try looking at, kind of field research for some people to look at other municipal websites and areas that may have them and see what they do. I'm just, why reinvent the wheel? And just figuring out what is provided, because it's a great idea, but I also don't want us to have some kind of drop down menu on the side that's just a random list of different things or people might get lost on. So it's how is it organized? And I guess the only way to really figure out how effective that is to look at some other sites and see what they do. That's the only thing I can think of. But if anybody has any ideas, because I know we always talked about, there was this with the tactile sign. We talked about places where asked where there were accessible bathrooms is another one, a place where there might be parking spots available with that, they're just stating that, all of Vermont, you can park in municipal parking meters with a placard and you're okay, or even as putting down like, ramp and accessible parking, just something, various things. And I guess I'm just warning about the various information we want to provide, how it wants to be organized. And it's a great idea. It's just how to get it organized and how to place it and what it looks like. And the only way I could think about that is to, look into other places and see what they do. But I don't know if anybody else has any ideas on that, or anything they want to share about it.
I think that what I've most commonly seen, because again, like as a personal visual impairment, I do a lot of research on places that I'm going to visit. And like, I just was in New York City. So I actually lived in New York City, so I don't need to do a ton of research, but I still like, even in that case, in a place I lived before, I still was like Googling a bit. And I think that how it most frequently presents itself, and maybe it's like honestly a good capture for people, is sort of like the benefits, like things that are, like special benefits a person with a disability might enjoy in the city that they should be aware of. So like, for example, in the subway system, being less expensive, but if the bus wasn't free in Burlington, that's the same thing too with GMTA, just letting people know, hey, you can ride the bus for 50% of the cost. So I think that those honestly are like the kind of the things that I know I look for, like what are some, like, can I ride the bus for free when I go into town or whatever? So making sure those things would be central, I think would be important.
So it's been helpful to hear some of these ideas. They do cross a lot of city departments kind of with where the service or the benefit is offered, which makes it a little tricky internally to kind of have us all come together to help put this project forward. I think one of the things that I often struggle with is what is a good example of a other municipality that presents this in a way that is actually helpful for the user versus you get frustrated or maybe don't make, choices to visit someplace because you can't find the information.
Yeah, and I get that too, looking at certain places. The interesting thing is though, I haven't really gone to municipal websites when we're going to some places. I more look at the private venues of where I'm going, but it's an interesting point that Ally makes. I mean, I'm a little bit different. The fact I have a physical disability with a chair, so a lot of time if we're looking at restaurants or we're going to see a theater, I go, of course, I'm looking about the accessible seating and stuff like that. But yeah, and again, it's all about organizing, and I just don't want to have this big drop down list of random stuff, but maybe that works, and I don't want to organize it in a condescending way. And again, I just think the only way is, well, number one is how do we organize it, how do we present it, and how do we make sure it's updated? I think that's another thing that happens a lot. I know with BCIL, when we share resources for people for things like that, if that's not updated and we say, oh, you can come here to find this, and they call the place and that place is no longer around, it's kind of frustrating. So it seems like it needs a lot of upkeep.
I mean, this wouldn't be very easy, but probably like maybe the most user-friendly and interesting presentation would be like an interactive map, right? So things just labeled on a map, where the accessible restrooms are, where even where like audible pedestrian signals are, where maybe particular parking might be. Like that would be a very cool, probably really expensive and time consuming way of presenting the information, but maybe the coolest way, I guess, of presenting the information.
Yeah, it's not as big of lift as it sounds. The city's been doing a really extensive asset management collection of what we have and where it is, and using GIS to put it out there or collect it spatially. And so that really just starts to become a sort of creating a map that shows our accessible parking spaces on the streets and in the lots and the garages. And we have it as it relates to what's out there publicly. The interface of other private parts is where it becomes more challenging, but it's not as far away, I think, as it could be, or it would have been a few years ago.
Laura, we could push that through the open data system over on Esri, and I mean, we could have that interactive map pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think also just creating the page that goes with it that explains some of what you can see and having it, because when GIS opens an info page, it's not the most user-friendly.
Well, that also would be my concern. Is I know a lot of people are internet savvy, so I do know sometimes. And I was actually looking, I think a long time ago, it was part of a GMAT one where they were actually working on an interactive map where you can highlight over certain areas, and it was a little tricky to use. So I think we would need to almost like want a combo of two things, like an interactive map and a drop down menu of some of these items. Again, it's just, and again, the only way I can think of is, I always say when in doubt, Google. So I always just go looking at other sites to kind of see what they do and kind of what they look like. But again, every area is different. So, but okay, Karen will be right back. But
well, and obviously because of the accessibility piece too, we'd have to ensure that it was something that was accessible. I was screen reader accessible. Obviously, that would be really bad and embarrassing if it wasn't. So it just kind of depends on how that system is set up. But yeah, that could be a really cool way, for somebody to sort of plan a trip. And I also I've never actually seen audible pedestrian signals marked on a map, and I think it's actually a really important thing because a lot of people are blind and visually impaired who are most comfortable planning a route that they might travel through the environment to the audible pedestrian signals. So
yeah.
Welcome Sophie and Max, one of the Maxes. Yeah, all right, one of the Maxes.
Thanks for remembering. Sorry we're late.
Yeah, no problem. We were just discussing the tactile sign and how we got there and how we liked the we thought it was a good place to put it up, and now just discussing what the discussion was is about how to how to make sure information about its location and other things available, and how the best way to go about that. And really, the thing was, the best way would be provide some information on the City of Burlington website or even other websites. But now we're thinking about like, how does that look like? What is the format? How to organize that in a way that's not just like this laundry list of, different things that's unorganized. And so one idea would have maybe been utilizing an interactive map for some people, but then some other ways. So that's what our current discussion is how to make sure this information is to people. So if they, you were there, as some people were saying, when they travel places, they do research in the accessible routes and how to make that information available. And for me, I was just like, the only way I would know the best way to organize it is try to find other websites that how they organize it as well.
So if I may, we've
Yep.
this issue of the website has kind of come up many times. Like basically, I feel like we've been talking about it for like past however long I've been at
Yeah.
this position, like years, not years, but like half a year or so. And I think the issue kind of boils down to one or two things, and maybe Scott can comment on this. I think it has a little bit to do with, I remember we used to have a lot of questions as to the role of this committee and what like we can actually do. And this website, or this web page and like map we've been talking about seems like it would be something that would represent the entire city as sort of like a end all. Yeah, so this is something we've talked about before. Like, I can edit CETO web pages like no problem, right? Like with the RRC, I can put a lot of resources, and I mean, if anyone has like a link to a map that already exists or resources that they would like to get out there, I can like put it right on the CETO RRC webpage, no problem. But the problem, I think it was like a couple meetings we had, was like whether or not we can as a committee just make this map as like an official part of the city, right? Like how that would work and like who would make the map. So yeah, I don't know. I guess those are some good questions, I think.
No, that's a great point. And I think what I'm looking for is feedback from, Scott or whoever would be it, or Laura, or is what can be done, what can we do, what the other part needs to be done to get this information forward. And I don't know, maybe it needs to be something like another website, like maybe me checking with VCIL to see if we could put information on stuff and people can be referred there. Like how would be the best way to go about that? What are the challenges to getting this information up, and what would be the best, the best way forward with it? Because, you're right. We have been talking about the website probably since I've been on the committee. So which is like, several years ago, and the subject comes up, and then the question is what to do about it and how it's done and what are the what's workable and what's not workable. So I think those all need to be addressed before saying, okay, how do we do that? What gets on there? And I don't know the answer to that.
I think that's a, as you said, Nate, it's a big conversation to have. Certainly there is a way for us to put it on our current website. That website over the course of the next year or so is probably going to change because the engine that runs our current website is end of life in November. And so we've got to figure out a way to move off of that and move on to something else. But even if we do that, we will, we'll obviously move stuff over. So if there's nothing stopping us from doing it, I think the real issue, and again, is what Nate and Ethan have said, is it's a lot of information, and you have to figure out how you present it. Because if you were to present a map with all the accessible things on it, it would be a mess. So you'd probably have to have several maps. You may have one for parking, you may have one for audible crossing markers, things like that. I mean, you just have to figure out what you want to show and probably create several maps to do it.
Yeah, and I was figuring if it's appropriate to I don't want to break it down by disability, saying for those who are blind and these are this way,
Right.
here's what you got, and these are deaf, and those are his wheelchairs. I don't know how that would come off, but yeah.
Yeah. I think from the IT perspective here at the city, I would certainly be looking at whether that's Ethan to take the lead on that as the staff representative for the accessibility committee, or working with us. I don't know that anybody on my team is qualified to figure out what we should put on an accessible map and what we shouldn't. I mean, we're happy to work with somebody and help figure that out. Is Sophie volunteering over there?
Yep.
No,
I see
no.
Sophie raising
Could
her hand. No,
you-
she's having feedback.
Could you use like a live map where visitors to the website could toggle like which features they're most interested in? And so that way it's all in one map. But
Yeah,
then
we could do that.
overwhelming.
We could do that through the open data portal. We could have all of the stuff on there, and you could just turn off layers, turn on layers, that type of thing.
Is that accessible? Would be the next question, right? Is
That
that
is-
another hurdle to get information? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. We'd have to find out. I mean, I think I know that the current website really isn't overly accessible.
Mm-mm.
Which is it's a larger undertaking than just this conversation. And one of the reasons, frankly, that we're considering some of the options we're considering is to make sure that we can lean on somebody else to help keep it accessible. But yeah, so to your question, I don't know if the open data portal is accessible or not.
But is there a way to use some of the funds from the committee that's allocated to hire a consultant that does this kind of work? You know what I mean? Like, because none of us are experts, right? So is there an expert out there that could help us move through, like, what is the best
I
option?
mean, we could get a really super high level indicator by creating one of these maps and then running it through any number of JAWS or one of the other screen readers and just see what it does. I mean, that's the first stuff. That's probably one of the first things we could do. I don't know. It's Esri is our publisher. That's what we use for our open data. They're the biggest beast out there in terms of this type of information. So I would like to think that maybe they're accessible, but I don't really know.
More digging.
It certainly can be. It just really depends on interactive maps can be screen reader accessible. Just totally depends on what it's built on. So there is a company in Burlington. I think are they Burlington, South Burlington? Anyway, there's a local company that does exactly this. I'm forgetting the name of it, but I think it's called Accessible Web. And they work with folks nationally on web accessibility issues. So that I think, as a local company would be a resource if we were going to put some funds towards something.
There are also companies and organizations that will review a website and, make sure it's ADA compliant, make sure it has, the proper accessibility features. And I think that may be the same one that you're referring to. I actually have a friend who does a lot of IT stuff. He's actually does a lot of accessibility stuff for Apple. And I can check in on that. But regarding the work on this, I think we would probably need to do a lot of this might be a side project, or we might need to have a combination of, maybe Ethan helps with some things, but then we have like a subcommittee of some of us putting on some work to kind of focusing on the website and do a little bit of a side thing where we're looking at other websites, what they look like, and looking like what to put the data on there and how it would look. That's the only way I can think about it, because this is a big, complicated technical issue, but also one that really is important, and I think really one that would push Burlington to the next level of providing accessibility to everyone, and I think it would be a big help. So we can certainly look into that more. I mean, the question is, what our next steps would be. We could certainly look into maybe if we get more people here, see who might be willing to be part of a subcommittee looking into that, what steps could be done about that. And just getting a list of the information we want to provide and what we could do that. That's the best I can come up with. Creating some kind of committee where we have a group of people kind of working on that and what needs to be done.
Can I ask a question? And Ally, you may be the best person that knows about this. I've worked in the public schools, and I also had an assistive technology certification as well as being an OT. And we were constantly trying to keep up with the new software coming out to make basic general information accessible, whether it be for kids with a reading disability that needed text to speech, or whether it be a student with a visual disability using JAWS. So I'm thinking too, some of these big software companies that we used to deal with, I'll use one as an example, Don Johnston, which basically targeted helping people with learning disabilities. What they are offering for support for general public, so that you don't need your own software to read a website, it's built in. So Ally, from your perspective, and I know you've worked with individuals to help
I
them use
think we might watch
technology.
because stuff like, is Ally still there? Because she's admitting, so she might have lost us.
Okay,
audio.
oops, I think she's coming back. Ally, are you back with us?
Yeah, sorry, I got kicked out.
That's okay. No, my question is, from your perspective from VABVI, with
Mhm.
helping people learn individual software programs themselves that they have purchased in order for
Mhm.
them to be able to access general information on websites.
Mhm.
There's two sides to this, and what we're looking at then is really for everything to be built in to the website. So you're not going to need your individual software that you have on your phone or on your home computer.
I think somebody, well, it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where somebody who's a blind screen reader user wouldn't need their software
Right.
to access a website. I mean, even self-voicing websites are not really typically designed for blind people. They're typically designed for people who need text to speech support. So I guess I would say, yeah, if somebody's blind and going to be using a screen reader to access the internet, like that's going to be the most comfortable way for them to access a website, most likely. However, like, of course, the built-in things around like, like enlarged text and like being able to change the contrast and things like that, those are great, just universal design supports that benefit everybody. But screen reading, I think, is something that's sort of probably always going to be there.
Right.
Yeah, Karen, this is Scott. My understanding and experience has been that you build the website in such a way that screen readers, it's accessible to screen readers.
Right.
You don't build it into the page itself, partly because I don't think you'd ever get it right, but partly because our experience was that people who were using those adaptive technologies are comfortable with one or another, and they want to continue to use that one because they've built a proficiency around it.
Right. So you just have to build your website so that, for instance, if something is a photograph that has text in it,
Yep.
it can be read.
Yeah, and what we're looking, so today, our city's website is built on a content management system that we are 100% responsible, not only for the content, but for everything else on the system. And we do not have a webmaster. We don't have somebody who's committed, dedicated to being a web designer, web developer, anything. So one of the things I think we're going to end up doing is when we go to the next platform, it will be more of a platform. So the content management system and all of the technology with that will be managed by that company, and we will be responsible for the content. So the reason we want to do that is for this very reason. We don't want to have to try to maintain an accessibility on our website that we are not capable, trained, or staffed to do. So we'll lean on someone else who has expertise in an area, and we'll continue to create content. So I'm hoping the goal, at least, is that those questions, Karen, that you're asking are addressed by that approach.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I could tell my limited knowledge of it is, just like there are ADA regulations for buildings and accessible. There are ADA regulations for websites. And one of those regulations is that websites should be able to be accessed by screen readers. And along with others that I honestly don't know about. So talking to Scott's point, it's just making them. And I can tell you some of the ones, actually, one that went through and made accessible was the Green Mountain Transit site. So if you go on that site and you kind of look over it and see the way it was built, that was done. So that was ADA compliant. And that was something when I was on the advisory committee that they really did a good job. And it's really, it doesn't look much different than anything else, but what it does have, it just has features where, it has enlargeable font, is able to be accessed by screen readers and all those things. But I could definitely see Scott's point is that updating it and making sure it's an ordeal. So, but it doesn't, it's supposed to be able to be universally accessed by people who use different softwares. So what it sounds like is that we can maybe get some more research, maybe look at some other sites, just try to figure out how we want this to look like, who we want doing it, and a way to make this work in a way that we can get useful information available in a way that's presentable, easy to find, and accessible. Easy peasy.
I think it would be worthwhile for us to take an attempt at showing this committee 2 different maps. We can do the accessible parking space. I'm about 94% sure we can do the on-street accessible parking spaces.
Okay.
And we do have the audible push buttons, but it's older data that was collected in 2014. So we've updated there'll be new locations since that point in time. But at least we could try at least one of those maps. Maybe, as I pull in our asset manager, what else that they are aware of, we could see what we can already generate to see what that looks like. But having the committee members start to develop that list of information that you guys use as resources for what are the benefits available or tools, lets us start sourcing the right staff members that are in charge of those different pieces. Just to let them know that we're going to try to collect this at least as information and see if it's how close it is for delivery.
We can
I
always
wonder
create
too,
this-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Allie.
Sorry, my daughter is so crying. I wonder too if it would be possible. I know that it'd be hard to kind of link a bunch of stuff, but I'm wondering if it's possible just to create maybe an infographic that could be housed somewhere, whether it's the CETA website or whether it's this interactive map website, whatever, that would kind of list out the things that we'd want folks to know visiting the city of Burlington. So the free parking piece and the cost of the bus being reduced if that was a factor. And I'd have to think more about what some of those other examples, but things that you couldn't capture on a map, but things that could be captured in just some kind of infographic that could exist on whatever page it needed to exist on in perpetuity.
It's an odd technical question for Scott. I feel like thinking about all the different city pages, the right place for it to live might be the Church Street Marketplace / business and workforce development group, just because as people think about visiting the city, that page also has that other types of content.
Yeah, I would
but
say
are they a
it's
different
probably-
platform?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And they're going to be a different platform, at least initially, when we go to the new system. Because they're not under the umbrella of the city website today.
Okay.
So always a monkey wrench. That's what I do.
Yep.
Yeah, we could have it in more than one spot. We could have a link. We could have it built and then build links out wherever we wanted them. That's probably the way I would say we should go.
Yeah.
Because I think that's better than having it in 7 different places natively, because then you have to update it all over the place.
Okay, so that helps with the question, because I do think that is probably one of the strongest pages that gets hit for people who are searching for something around Burlington. That wouldn't be like, I don't want to go to the city's government website. I want to go to the, marketing promotional, where am I going to find fun things in the city website? But that could always link back to whatever we create. And I am more on the page of what Ali was saying, like even a basic page to explain some of these fundamentals is a good place to start versus getting to that perfect web page that's going to take a while to develop.
So I'm wondering if we might want to start up going, Laura, to your original part of maybe we should create a shared document or something where we can start listing, some of the ideas we have for accessible information and maybe get it to people for the different, departments and get their feedback on it. So, we can all put our ideas about information we think would be good and relevant and to share, and then we can, that we can kind of flush it out from there. That's just a basic start to it. It's just creating a shared page and get that information down and written, and then see what we have and take it from there. I think that's the simplest way to start it, in my opinion. Yep, Sophie.
I like the idea of an infographic, because then it could be, thrown out into social media and promoted that way too. So it's already a tool in itself. And I'm wondering if we can couple it with language translation, because all of that to me is all accessibility, right? So is there a way to just, broaden the message, but hit those key points that Ali was mentioning, like there's free parking for accessible spaces, there's reduced, and add that information and make it attractive and easy to find on the website, and also easy for a reader or anything else to pick up on as well. And if you don't speak English, the icons can help also deliver that information, hopefully.
So I will say, just to address what Ali was saying with the CETO, yeah, I definitely agree with what Scott was saying with like the links, because if it's something, just using CETO as an example, like if it was something we wanted to host on the CETO webpage, I would have to, like run it up and get it approved, and it would have to properly represent, CETO and everything. But like I said earlier, I could just drop a link on the webpage. And I will say our front desk does field like a lot of questions and reports from around the city, just because we're right at City Hall, and our front desk is also the front desk for RIB and the mayor's office. So that that spreadsheet, or that shared document could be really helpful, because I can get that to the person at the front desk and make sure she's knows everything, can field all those questions effectively. And yeah, also happy to help out with language access. I will do a quick pitch. We're getting to the end of the fiscal year, and CETO does hold a budget. This is just to other city departments, but we do hold a budget to help other city departments with their language access projects. So if anyone has anything, and this as well, happy to get that done and squared away. But we are coming up to the end of this year's funding, so.
Ethan, on that point, I'm wondering if the person who fields all the calls, same with like customer service at Miller for parks, if they have like the regular questions they get about accessibility, that they could contribute as well to that document, so that we're aware of what information we need to provide if we go the infographic route too.
Yeah, I can definitely check with her. Something we would like to do is, and maybe if you guys have any suggestions, then that would be great, because I could put down, this is suggested by BACA, is some auditory and visual aids. We would just want to make sure we're up to date on that as well as part of language access. And again, a budget is going to disappear soon, so good time for us to buy equipment and whatever we need right now.
So we've spent the vast majority of the meeting talking about this, which is good, because I think it's an important subject to discuss. but I'm getting the sound of it is that maybe we can start generating a shared info document to maybe start getting these ideas down to go around to people and we can contribute to them. I don't know if anybody wants to start that, if there's any shared page that I can obviously create something on my drive and share it to people and people can provide feedback and do it and we can update it as need be. Just wanting to see what people's thoughts are about that. I could certainly create that. I can get one started and we can pass it around. Or if somebody else wants to start it out.
I'm gonna say it's better if you do it from an external side, just with the open, what am I? Public information records request of all city files and documents, that you might get a more complete answer from other people if they're not subject to that.
Okay, so I could create it from, you mean, so the VCIL side, we could, I mean, we'll do that. So what I can do is, what I will do is I will create a shared document. It's just gonna be a simple Word document with some information. I'll put in some information on it, provide to some other people, they can provide information. So at least we have thoughts down there. And then we can organize that as we see fit and kind of build it and then figure out what to do with it.
I do agree with you, Laura, but because this is a sanctioned committee through everything we create has got to be a public record. So, I mean, ultimately, Nate, this is what you and Ethan and I were talking about. Ultimately, I'm going to need to pull not only everything, we have to make sure that we have everything for this committee on our systems, so it's a matter of public record and can be accessed. And then going forward, we're going to need all of these going forward in Civic Clerk, the agenda and meeting management system that we're putting together. So unfortunately, Laura, I don't disagree that there may be people who are willing to talk, quote unquote, off the record.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of what we're creating, we do need it to be public record.
Okay, then maybe Nate, as we start to put this together, are you willing to be maybe like a funnel for people that don't feel comfortable editing the document because their name will eventually be tied to it as a shared piece of information?
Yeah, I mean, I'll
Does
certainly
that
take
make
information.
sense?
Yeah, I would certainly. Are you talking to me or Ally? Can you say me, Lori?
Someone else who's, and I mean, it can happen through the city through a voice phone call, and then one of us can type something in, but I'm just, some people are sensitive about adding the information that might feel too personal to put out there. And sometimes having just that filter of someone to enter that into the electronic record that can be searched or requested or found forever.
Well, I'm happy to start something and create it and we can put it on, and then if the time comes needs where we need to move it over. I mean, we're already using the VCIL Zoom chat room and I'm saving it on the VCIL thing. So ultimately I'm only need to be moved over, but we'll just continue to ride this. I'll continue to ride the VCIL sources until we have to move it over. I mean, I'm okay with that. And when that day comes, we can look into it then.
Yeah, just quickly on that. While I have you, Scott, I do have all of the meeting agendas and minutes and everything shared on our city SharePoint. Does that need to be like on the city webpage as well?
It needs to be, yes, it needs to be publicly accessible.
Yeah, so sorry, I misspoke. So those are on the city webpage, but so this meeting is being recorded. Does this recording need to be on the city webpage as well?
It does. If we're creating a recording, it should be over there.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, and I have and like I said, I actually have these on my. It's non-published, but it's on my. I upload these onto a YouTube page, so we can always move those over at some point. If need be. So I don't make them public. I don't publish them. I send the link to people. So it's not something you Google, but it was, they're there if we need to move them over someplace.
Does that include transcript as well, Scott?
It does. Anything The basic tenet here is that anything we create as action of the committee is a matter of public record. So transcripts, minutes, videos, audio recordings, agendas, any submissions that we do, anything like that, all of that needs to be part of the public record.
And I will say, thanks to Ethan, we have been doing we have been doing transcripts, but only recently because I did not put them down. But okay. All right, so it sounds like we have a game plan on that end. We have about 10 minutes left, and but we really talked about what the bulk of what I got the agenda on was the tactile sign and the website. So we have some plans for that. The only other two things I got on there, and I don't know, Catherine isn't here, but I know there was the idea to use some of the funds for that event for the New Americans, for New American version of the screening project. I was just wondering if there's an update on that, but I don't know if anything had that, and or if Ally, if you'd heard anything about, is that did funds go towards that? I'm just
The only
was
thing
just-
I've heard is that John hasn't heard anything. So that's all I know, is that he submitted a budget and then didn't hear anything back. So I was hoping today at the meeting to get some, that we would have some idea if that was gonna work or not, but it sounds like maybe not.
Well, we can send an email to Catherine just for an update on that, and just see what's going on with that.
You might want to wait to email her tomorrow. There's major budget tonight, so
Mhm.
that might be part of it. Just as a strategy to get at the top of her
Yeah.
inbox.
Yeah. And then the next one, just the thing I had in the agenda, and it kind of was an idea I got from our previous meeting. We had discussed, providing like funds for people to use for, projects to help make places more accessible and stuff. And instead of us, I think it was Sophie I mentioned, like, instead of us coming idea, let people come to us. And one idea I got is, and we can fine tune it, is maybe find a way that we could use portions of the funds for like mini grants or something like that. I don't know. So people could come to us with ideas to help improve accessibility, and then we would be able to utilize like that. And it could be different things. I do wonder about the audio buttons for the crosswalks, if that's something where, somebody says there's an area that doesn't have that, or if that would interfere with DPW funds. If they say they need something like that, maybe we could use the funds for there. But just instead of us sitting here coming up with ideas, just say, every year we have one or two mini grants up to, I don't know, 2,000 each or something like that for people to apply to help improve accessibility in the area. So that was kind of like what I was. So I'd be interested more if that's along the line. You mentioned the capital project. I don't know if that's in line with it is, but maybe if we fine tune something to be like that going forward, as I know we're trying to find uses for the budget, and I think that'd be a really good idea. It could also help get more involvement in this committee, more people to come to the committee to ask questions.
I'm not actually, I don't even know, and I think there's something on here from DPW what the cost of one of those even is. But I know of a couple places in town where there really should, well, in my humble opinion as a blind person walking around town, there really probably should be one. So that would be, the more audible pedestrian signals there are, to a certain extent, right? There's a science to it as far as like interference between them and stuff, but the more the better.
Yeah, just an idea of an example of something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another part that another thing that like I've thought about too, that again, this is like saying this the 11th hour of this meeting, so something to think about for the future, but we really should probably switch all of the ones in Burlington away. There's a few that have the bird chirping sound, and there's a lot of research that shows that we really shouldn't be using that sound for audible pedestrian signals, because actually some blind people have been killed that way from hearing birds chirping and thinking that oh, it's time for me to cross, and walking out into traffic. So I think like just generally speaking, the audible pedestrian signal like thing could like use a little bit more examination, and also like maybe some input from, you know, people who actually use them and kind of what their experience is in town.
Yeah, that
but
all
the-
makes sense. And I
Yeah.
don't have the cost of what the current ones go for. I do know that as we started installing some of the audible ones that named the street that should be being crossed, we started getting some feedback that it was overly confusing to various individuals. And I feel like it actually was more confusing to people who could see without impairment, that they didn't know what was happening. But it would be really helpful as we do move forward to do that in a way that's more helpful for the community that needs it and will benefit from it than just having our staff kind of move forward. We had a staff turnover this year, so we have someone in the position now that is a lot more forward thinking and open to suggestion than the previous person who held it, which is helpful.
Yeah, and I just, as an aside, I happen to like, so I'm an orientation mobility instructor, so I'm certified to teach people who are blind and visually impaired, and my travel independently community, and my mentor when I was going through my graduate program is this man named Gene Berkwin, who is like semi-retired now, but I would say he's like the leading expert nationally on the topic of audible pedestrian signals for the blind, and there's like probably nobody's done more research on the topic than him. So I'm sure I could probably loop him into any time, like if we ever wanted to kind of like take a comprehensive look at the audible pedestrian signals in Burlington and like, you know, think about, because they are just like slightly piecemeal, you know, like some places it's the name, the street crossing, other places it's the bird chirping, other places it's the wee woo sound. So
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, like they're super helpful, and I'm really grateful the city's invested in some of them. And I think it would be even better, you know, like a great example that where there would be a fantastic spot for one is right on the corner of Winooski and College. That's a kind of weird timed intersection there. And if you're blind, you know, anyway, there's a lead pedestrian interval there where you're supposed to start walking, and you wouldn't know necessarily to start walking because you're not getting any auditory input to do that. So there's just like those little things, and unless you're like have to walk around the town, that you wouldn't necessarily pick up on.
Yeah. No, that's definitely really helpful feedback. And I think to the point that we talked about earlier, you know, if we can identify some funding after I get an idea what these cost and what any limitation is for installing them.
Yeah,
You
so
know.
I'm hearing two parts. I think the grant idea would be good. It's just trying to fine tune that and see what that may look like and how we could do that. Ally, one thing we did early on, this is back when Ron Redmond was running the marketplaces. You know, we did some things where we would have members of the committee just go around, and I think we did it for sidewalks and just look at sidewalks in kind of different areas where the sidewalk is really in disrepair, so we couldn't, and we take pictures of it and add it and send a report. I'm just wondering, maybe even at some point we might want to arrange an outing where members of the blind, visually disabled community go around and we check out crosswalks and just see what the audio there is and what's there, and just kind of have a good mapping of it to see what areas work, what doesn't work, what are some suggestions, and kind of create an outing like that to provide some data. That was some of the early goings on, but those are just some food for thought for the future. So we are right at 3:59, which is it. And then our next meeting is, and we are going to be back onto the third of the month. So the next meeting, I believe, is going to be the 17th. And I definitely understand with summer here, some people may not be here on vacations and stuff, but hopefully I will see everybody then. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? We can meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.